From the land of 10,000 lakes and just as many heartaches, welcome to the 301 Show. We're here to celebrate, commiserate, and maybe, just maybe, see a Minnesota team win it all. Whether you're dreaming of a Vikings Super Bowl, reliving the glory days of the Twins, or still recovering from the Timberwolves roller coaster, we've got you covered. This is the 301 Show, where the North remembers and the passion never fades.
Yes, welcome into episode 5 of the 301 Show. We got an interesting episode here for you today. We'll start with the disappointing Timberwolves season opener against the Lakers, where they stand amongst the 24 teams that have played one game thus far in the short NBA season. And we go over to some free agents that the Twins could possibly sign this offseason. Then the Wild continue their absolute tear through the NHL opponent so far. And then we will look back at the Vikings getting punched in the mouth for the first time this year and preview how they will respond. We do have some predictions throughout all of that for each sport, so let's dive right into it. All right, the Timberwolves here, the Wolves' Den. They lost the first game to the Lakers 110 to 103 in LA at the Staples Center. I guess it's the crypto something center or something like whatever. It'll always be the Staples Center to me out in LA there. Um so they did lose their first game. I want to say that it did not look good for the Timberwolves to start the year. But I still think that they are going to figure this one out. I have faith in Chris Finch and Tim Conley of what they are building here in Minnesota. Tim Conley reworked his contract to stay here for at least one more season. We'll see what happens next offseason when if the ownership group actually changes or not. Um, but yeah, I trust this coaching staff and front office. Um, I think it's just going to take some time for the team chemistry to get there. I think the Cat trade, I think the worst part about it was honestly the fact that it happened, I think, 3 days, like the Friday before the training camp and preseason games started. So it was like 3 days before the um, season actually started. So I just don't think they had the time to they haven't had the time to fully get to know their, new teammates and how exactly they're going to be playing together. Um, we saw this when Rudy Gobert came here too. It took the entire season for them to actually start gelling together, and obviously it didn't help that Cat was hurt for a lot of the year. Um, so they couldn't get that their full team chemistry, and it took till last year to actually fully realize the true potential of this team. So all these Timberwolves fans that are, you know, sounding the horn, they're at DEF CON, whatever the high, I guess it's yeah, whatever the highest level of DEF CON is, they're um at it. I'm like, okay, pump the brakes. It was one game. Like they will be fine. In my opinion, they will be fine. And looking at the team rankings here, again, only 24 teams have played. The rest of the teams play tonight. The Timberwolves also play tonight, but um, they will. I believe that they will be okay, and they will be right up there with the top teams in the Western Conference this year. So if we look ahead to the next week of games for the Timberwolves, they're in Sacramento tonight. I'm recording this on Thursday, the 24th. So they're in Sacramento tonight at 9 p.m. Central. Then on Saturday, the 26th, they are hosting Toronto in their first home game at 7 p.m. Central. And then on the 29th, next week, they are hosting a rematch of the Western Conference Finals at 6:30. So they are hosting Dallas on the 29th next week. So I do think they have a really good chance here, especially against Toronto and Sacramento, to get two big wins and right this ship right away. And Dallas will be a tough test here to see if how the new pieces are actually gelling together. And I think it's a good test early on here in the season. So I do want to go over a little bit of statistics here um, for the Timberwolves. Again, it is only one game. These are gonna adjust very quickly here, either for the better or for the worse. They will be fluctuating a lot here early in the season. Same thing with the Wild's rankings here. Points for per, and again, this is just on a one game sample size. So points for per game, the 103 points for, that was 23rd out of the 24 teams. Field goal shooting percentage, they are 41%. So that is 21st out of the 24 teams. 3-point shooting, they are 31.7%, which is 16th. Free throw percent, they are 71.1 or 74.1%. That's good for 16th in the entire league. Now, rebounds per game, they had 47 rebounds in the first game, which is tied for 7th in the entire NBA. Blocks per game, they only had one, that's tied for dead last in the NBA. The turnover differential, they were +8 on the turnover differential, and that was tied for second in the entire NBA. So if they can keep turning the ball over and just getting the ball more, I know that's not a 100% the time of possession in the NFL. It's not a guaranteed win, but you do have a lot better of a chance if you control the ball more than they do. Points against per game, 110. That's tied for ninth out of the 24 teams that have played. Field goal percentage against. Field goal percentage against is 44.2%. That is 10th in the entire league. Three-pointer shooting percentage against is 16.7. That is number one in the entire NBA. So they are very good from the perimeter defensively. The Timberwolves are. The rebounds against per game are 46. That's tied for 15th amongst the 24 teams that have played. And blocks against per game are 8, and that is tied for 14th amongst the 24 teams that have played. So I do expect those numbers will get a lot better here very quickly. And I think that they will be set here very soon. So for predictions, did have um, two predictions come off the board for the Wolves Den. I said that the Lynx would win the WNBA championship. That one was incorrect. And that the Wolves would beat the Lakers in the season opener. That one was also incorrect. So far on the year, I am 0 for 3 on my Wolves Den prediction. So that is a 0% on the Wolves Den predictions. So I am hoping that this week I can bounce back here. And I've got 3 predictions here. 2 of the 3 of them will come off the board by next week. The first prediction I have is that the Wolves will win 2 of their next 3 games. So they'll win 2 before next week's episode of the 301 show. My second prediction that will also come off the board is that they will win their home opener against Toronto. And then my third one, which we'll have to wait a little bit for, is that the Wolves will win Cat's homecoming game back to Minnesota. So whenever that game is, I think that's middle of the season. Um, Whenever Cat comes back and plays in Minnesota for the first time, and it doesn't matter if he is playing, it is the first time the Knicks play in Minnesota. That game that the Knicks play in Minnesota this year, the Timberwolves will win that game. All right, now let's move over to our target field talkers here. Um, so Sports Illustrated came out with their MLB's best free agents best fits, and the Twins were mentioned for 10 of the, I believe it was 32 players, 33 players, something like that. Um, and I just want to go over four players quick here that I think are actually like somewhat realistic for the Twins to go after this offseason, predicated that the front office actually is given permission to go make some moves. So I've got two pitchers and two hitters here that should be on Twins fans' radar, at least this offseason. I'm not guaranteeing that the Twins will go out and sign them, just four guys that should be at least looked at by Twins fans. The first guy here is Jack Flaherty. You'll remember him. He was with the uh, Tigers for the beginning part of last year and then was traded at the deadline to the Dodgers. Um, so the Twins are very familiar with him as just facing him in the AL Central. And his stats last year look like they were 20. He had 28 games pitched. He had a 13-7 record with a 3.17 ERA. He had 162 innings pitched. He gave up 24 home runs, which is on the higher end. He struck out 194 to 38 walks, and that is a ratio of 5.11 strikeouts for every one walk. And um, Jeff Bowden projected his salary or his contract to be a 3-year deal for $68 million. So again, that is one of the higher end pitchers. That's going to be one of the more expensive ones. But if the front office is given permission to go out and sign people, he would be a great guy to add to the rotation. And then you have four very good starters with Pablo, Joe Ryan, if he's actually coming back from an injury, bounces back from his injury, Bailey Ober, and Jack Flaherty. So Jack Flaherty could actually be that Joe Ryan like insurance marker. Um, but we will see with that. The second guy would not be a Joe Ryan insurance marker. That's more of he's more of like a 4 or 5 starter, but just gives you more depth in the bullpen to not have to rely on the young guys so much, which again, the Twins learned this year with Paddock going down and Joe Ryan going down that they just need starting pitching depth. That guy is Michael Wacha. He had 29 games played, went 13-8. He had a 3.35 ERA in 166 and 2/3 innings pitched. He only gave up 17 home runs, but he had 145 strikeouts to 45 walks, and that is a 3.22 strikeout to walk ratio. So definitely not as good as a Jack Flaherty, but his the Bowden projected contract would be 3 years for $54 million. So a lot more team friendly of a deal on that one than the Jack Flaherty, but it's just a matter of, are you willing to spend that extra $14 million to go out and get the better pitching? So those are the two pitchers I was looking at that could be somewhat realistic on the radar of Twins fans this year. So I have an infielder and an outfielder here for the two position players, hitters. Um, First one is first baseman Reese Hoskins. Obviously, I would love to see Carlos Santana back on a 1 year deal. I just don't know how super realistic that is. I'm praying that it is realistic. Um, but Reese Hoskins would be a decent backup option, or like second option for if you can't bring back Carlos Santana. He had 131 games played, 449 at bats. His slash line was 214, 303, 419, and 722. Um, he had 59 runs scored, 15 doubles, 26 home runs, 53 walks, and struck out 149 times. Um, he in the field he played 96 games. He had 660 chances at first base, um, 602 putouts. He had 55 assists and only three errors. So in 660 chances, he only made three errors. That is good for a 995 fielding percentage. And again, the projection is a 2 year deal worth $34 million. Um, and so I just think that's again I would rather do a Carlos Santana 1 year deal, um, because of how good Carlos Santana was at first base. Like we talked about last week, he was a Gold Glove finalist for the American League at first base, and it's gonna be tough to replace that either. Like no matter who you bring in, if it's not Carlos Santana, and I will say Carlos Santana is getting up there in age, so I worry even if you do bring him back, is he going to be the same player he was this past season for the Twins? Um, but if it's not, again, Carlos Santana is the top of my list right now on a 1 year, maybe a 2 year deal. But Carlos Santana is the top of my list. And then Reese Hoskins would probably be number two for what the Twins could be paying at that point, at that price point. So Reese Hoskins is number two for me. Um, then the outfielder, this would be, you're probably not bringing back Kepler at this point. Um, and the guy that I am really excited about, if this is actually true, if the Twins could go out and get him. Again, this does rely on them actually being willing to spend some money this offseason. Um, but it's from the Padres, Jurickson Profar. He in 158 games, he had got up to bat 564 times, had a 280 batting average, got on base 380 times, had a slugging percentage of 459, and then an OBP of 839. He also scored 94 runs, had 29 doubles, 24 RBIs, 76 walks, and 101 strikeouts. So he has a much better walk to strikeout ratio than Reese Hoskins is. Um, a little bit less home runs, but a lot more, almost double the amount of doubles, and a way better on base and batting average too. And he was able to stay on the field for 20, almost 30 more games. Um, Now in the field, he played 148 games. He had 235 chances out in left field. He had 230 putouts. He threw four guys out from the outfield, and he made one error. That is a fielding percentage of 996, so very similar fielding percentage as Reese Hoskins. If you were to ask me which, like, the Twins could only sign one of these four guys, I'm saying I should say, if they can only sign one of these two guys, one of the two fielders, I would say bring back Carlos Santana and give me Jurickson Profar, because Jurickson Profar is a younger player and he can actually be more of your kind of more immediate like he can step in and play, but then help you more long term as well. The Bowden projection on his contract is 3 years for $44 million. So that is $14 million per year. So that's not that bad for that type of production in for a left fielder. And the Twins do need a corner outfielder right now. You can't rely solely on Manny Margot and Matt Wallner and if Kepler's leaving, you also don't want Willie Castro to be changing positions every other inning. Um, so those are my thoughts on the Twins free agent. Um, so here are my three predictions for the Twins. All of these predictions are going to be pushed out to the future. Haven't had anything come off the board just yet for the Twins, again, because I started this podcast in the Twins off season. So, um, yeah, nothing's come off the board for the Twins. So first prediction for today is that Jerkson Profar will be signed by the Twins this offseason. I am mostly just trying to speak this one into existence. Um, Second prediction is kind of a follow-up to the first one. If the first one comes true, the second one will most likely come true. But my second one is that Max Kepler will not be a Twin on opening day. And then final prediction is that Ryan Jeffers will be the opening day starting catcher. So he will get the start on opening day behind the plate for the Twins. All right, now we're moving over to the Rinkside Rundown here for the Wild. We'll look back here to the last two games this past week. The game in Columbus, the Wild did win 3-1. Had three different goal scorers that game. Marco Rossi got his second goal of the year. Kirill Kaprizov got his second, and then Matt Zuccarello got his third goal of the game. Excuse me, not of the game, of the year. The Blue Jackets ruined my prediction. Well, not ruined it, but I could have had a prediction right here. But they had to go and ruin my chance for this game. But happening this game with Yegor Chinnikov scoring with a minute 25 remaining in the third period on Philip Gustafson. Today, excuse me, not today, a couple days ago, Florida, the game in Florida against the Panthers, the Wild won 5-1. And they had five different goal scorers in this game. Marco Rossi getting his third of the year. Marcus Johansson getting his first. Matt Boldy getting his third. Matt Zuccarello getting his fourth of the year, leads the Wild with 4 goals. And Joel Eriksson getting his second. Halfway through that second period, Sam Bennett scored the only goal of the game for the Panthers. So the Wild, one thing I do want to bring up is the Wild have not trailed at all this year. They have 2 losses on the year, but both of them were in either overtime or a shootout. So those games end immediately when the Wild gave up the lead. So they have not trailed for a single second this season. The undefeated Winnipeg Jets have trailed this season. So the Wild can kind of hang that over the Winnipeg fans' head a little bit there. They're up to 360 minutes of not trailing. I'll knock on wood a little bit here as we hope that streak continues. They are second in the history of the NHL to for longest amount of time not trailing to start a year. The 1969-1970 Boston Bruins are the ones with the record. They went 457 minutes and 21 seconds. So the Wild are less than 2 games away from breaking the all-time record for not trailing to start the season, and they could very well do that. I could be on this microphone next week talking to you guys about the Wild owning this record. They play 3 games in the next week. They will wrap up their 7-game road trip before next week's episode. Tonight they are playing in Tampa Bay. It's kind of a mecca of Minnesota sports here tonight. They're playing in Tampa Bay at 6 p.m. Central Time. In Tampa Bay, the projected goalies for this game are Marc-Andre Fleury and Andrei Vasilevsky for the Tampa Bay Lightning. This could change, but these are just the projected goalies for tonight. All-time series between these two teams, the Wild actually lead the all-time series. They have 20 wins, 10 regulation losses, and 3 overtime or shootout losses. While in the last 10 games, the Wild lead the series. They have 6 wins, 3 regulation losses, and 1 overtime or shootout loss. On Saturday, they travel to Philadelphia to take on the Flyers. Flyers lead that series. The Wild have 12 wins, 16 regulation losses, and 3 overtime or shootout losses. And then in the last 10, the Wild are 5-3-2 against the Flyers. So they are mounting a comeback here to try to even up the all-time series. They could get within 2 games of making this all-time series a 500 record this season. Tonight or Saturday night will be the first game between the Flyers and the Wild. And then on the 29th next week, they take on the other Pennsylvania team. So on this end of this road trip, they end with the 2 Florida teams and the 2 Pennsylvania teams. They play the Pittsburgh Penguins. And again, the Penguins also lead the all-time series. The Wild's record is 15-16-1. And the Penguins have dominated the last 10 games. They are 2-7-1 in the last 10 games against each other. So I want to go over some team rankings here and then some Gus Bus rankings here. So team rankings first. They are scoring 3.33 goals for per game. That is tied for 13th in the entire NHL. That is up since last week's episode. Goals against per game, they are sitting at a 2.25. That is tied for 6th. That 2.25 number is down since last week's episode. Power play, they're sitting at 33. They're one third of their power plays they are converting on 33.3%, and they're sitting at 4th in the entire NHL. The penalty kill is the weak point at this point. They're sitting at 75%. That is good for 24th in the entire NHL out of 32 teams. So what has been historically pretty good for the Wild in the penalty kill is not doing that well this year. So they do need to work on the penalty kill this year. That is the kind of one glaring issue based off of the team rankings is the penalty kill. Now on to Gus Bus. Statistically, he is a top 1 or 2 goaltender so far this year. He has a 4-0-1 record. That is tied for 2nd in the entire NHL. He has a .952 save percentage, which is tied for 2nd in the entire NHL. And he has a .140 goals against average, which is tied for 2nd in the entire NHL. So Gus Bus, I think I need to start calling for trades on more of these players, and then they will actually start, playing better. Because I called for him to be traded by Bill Guerin here, and he started doing that. He's playing very well. And yeah, let's hope that the Wild can get a couple more wins here or continue the streak this week. And let's move on to predictions now. So from this last week, only one came off the board here for the Wild. That was the Wild will collect at least 2 points before this week's episode. They collected all 4 points that they possibly could have. So that will end my week for Rinkside Rundown in a perfect 1-for-1. Overall on the season, I am 2 for 3 on my Rinkside Rundown predictions. That is good for 67% on the year. And yeah, so good for 67%. That one is, I'll give you just a hint now. I know we're not to the Nordic Report yet, but 2 for 3 percentage wise is my best percentage of the 4 segments here we have on the 301 show. So that tells you anything about which sport I apparently know the best. 67% for the Rinkside Rundown. All right, so we got to do these 3 predictions here for the Rinkside Rundown to track for next week and beyond. Actually, all 3 of these should come off the board by next week. So we will have all 3 of these. We'll have at least 3 predictions for the Rinkside Rundown coming off for next week. First one is that the Wild will win at least 2 of the games before next week's episode. So 2 of the 3 games. They won't, if they win 1 and lose 2 of them in overtime or a shootout and they get 4 of the 6 points, that does not count. They will straight up win at least 2 of their next 3 points. The Wild will also break the not trailing record set by those 69-70 Boston Bruins. So they will break the record. And again, we will know that before next week's episode. So last prediction I have here for the Rinkside Rundown is that Kirill Kaprizov will have at least 3 points in 1 game before next week's episode. So in either in Tampa Bay tonight or either of the 2 games in Pennsylvania, he will have 3 points in 1 game. All right. So let's move on to the Nordic Report here. Let's look back to the Vikings' first loss of the season. They lose to the Lions 31-29. The Lions kicked the field goal with 15 seconds remaining in the game, and then the Vikings could not get the last second miracle or anything like that. Set up Big Leg Bill, Will the Thrill, Will Reichert for a potential game-winning field goal to stay undefeated. My biggest gripe with this game is Brian Flores. It's the first time I think he's had a major gripe. I've had a couple of minor gripes with him, but first major gripe of the season with him. I think like Jared Goff is one of if not the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL when he is getting rushed. So he was going to be able to handle the Vikings pass rush here. And it just seemed like Flores didn't want to change anything. He's like, hey, here's our game style. We're going to stick to this exact game style and play that way the entire game, when clearly for a while there in the middle of the game it wasn't working. It wasn't. They would send basically it seemed like they would just send the front 7 and just leave the secondary out to dry, and the secondary looked a lot worse than they actually played. And you can't leave guys like Amon-Ra just wide open for the Lions. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown was not the best receiver on that field talent-wise, but he is good enough to where if you leave him one-on-one, he is likely going to make you pay for that. And that seemed like what they were, the Vikings were trying to do was just, hey, we're gonna put pressure on him and make him make a throw, but they just connected way too often for that to actually be an effective strategy. So I think Brian Flores should have actually changed his strategy this time. Um, I talked about in the Packers and the Jets games how he changed his strategy too much when it was working. And this time it seemed like he swung too far the other way and saw it wasn't working and just continued to do what wasn't working. So um yeah, that's just those are my thoughts about the game. Um Sam Darnold didn't play a great game, a perfect game, but he also didn't play a terrible game. I thought he was pretty good, I guess. But then he was actually way more like Kirk Cousins than we have seen all year because he didn't really step up when he needed to the most. So that is the best way I think I can put Sam Darnold's performance. Um so looking at tonight's game, they're playing the Rams in LA on Thursday Night Football. Unfortunately for the Vikings secondary and the Vikings defense, both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are back for the Rams, although they look like they're both going to be a little bit limited in um, the amount of playing time they get, but they are both back. So the Vikings won't get to just rely on not great receivers there for the Rams. And TJ Hawkinson, as far as I could tell, I was trying to find this on any type of injury report, but TJ Hawkinson is still questionable to return for tonight's game. So, want to go over some team rankings here, offense, defense, special teams, and then we'll get on to predictions and we can get out of here for this episode. So, offense, um, yards per game, they are gaining 332 yards per game. Excuse me, 333.2 yards per game, which is good for 13th in the entire NFL. They have 28 points per game, which is 6th in the entire NFL. And then third down, they are 28 for 69. That is good for 40.6%, which that percentage is good for a tie for 12th in the entire league. So they're converting on third down almost half the time, about 2/5 of the time. Um, and yeah, that's just above league average there on that. So their offense is still in the top half of the league. Um, Defense is still well up in the top half of they're probably a top 10. I think at the beginning of the year they look like a top 5 defense, but I think they're have taken a little bit of a step back, but I would still call them a top 10 defense in the National Football League. The yards per game, they are 340.3 yards per game given up. That is 19th in the entire NFL. Points per game is 17.8, which is 6th in the entire NFL. On third down, other teams are converting on 26 out of, or they're converting 26, they have converted 26 times out of a possible 81 third downs. That is a rate of 32.1%, which is tied for 7th in the entire NFL. Fourth down, Vikings only, defense only, the Lions offense only went for it once, and that was on the fake punt. Did not get that one. They are now, opponents are have converted 4 out of 14 possible fourth downs. That is 28.6%, which is good for third in the entire National Football League. Um, and again, now I want to get into the special teams here, which I think could be one of, I think he is up there with Sam Darnold and maybe Brian Flores' scheme as one of the bigger surprises for this. I should say one of the biggest pleasant surprises for this Vikings team. And Will Reichert, um, he is still perfect. He is 30 for 30 across field goals and extra points. He is 12 for 12 on field goals. There's only 4 teams on field goals that are left at perfect, that are 100% on field goals, and the Vikings are one of them. His long is still the 58-yarder against the Texans at U.S. Bank in Week 3. That is tied for 6th in the entire NFL. And PATZ is 18 for 18. Again, most of the league is 100% on PATs, but the field goals, and I don't have this number in front of me, but he is insane from 50 yards plus. I would actually like to know, I can look this up for next time, how many of his kicks are 50 plus versus 49 or less. So Will Reichert, yeah, again, one of the, I'd say, top 3 surprises here for the Vikings so far this year. 2 predictions off the board this week for the Vikings for the Nordic Report. The first one is that TJ Hawkinson and Aaron Jones will both play in Week 7, which was this last week against the Lions. That was half correct, but unfortunately, we at the 301 show do not give out partial credit. So that one will be completely wrong. Aaron Jones did play, TJ Hawkinson did not. So that one is incorrect. And then the second prediction is the second prediction here, excuse me, that one was actually correct. This second one is actually correct. I marked it incorrect. But my second prediction, I'll have to go back and double check and make sure I said this one correctly. My second prediction here is the Lions beat the Vikings this Sunday. So, they obviously did. So that one is correct on the board for me. I had marked it incorrect originally, but that one is a correct prediction for me. So on the Nordic Report, those are the first 2 off the board for this season, this year. I am 1 for 2 on the year for those, so I'm sitting at 50%. Overall, this season, this year, between all 4 segments that we have here on the 301 show, I am 3 for 8 for a 38% correct rate. Just a quick rundown on the percentages here on the 301 show. 67% correct on the Rinkside Rundown, 0% on the Wolves Den, and 50% on the Nordic Report. 0 have come off the board for Target Field Talkers, so that is non-applicable for right now. All right, so the last 3 predictions here for the Nordic Report for this episode. First one, the Vikings will beat the Rams by 9+ points, so they will beat them by 1 score or more tonight. Again tonight, Justin Jefferson will lead both teams in receiving yards tonight against the Rams. So anybody that catches a pass for either team, Justin Jefferson will have the most receiving yards. And then I didn't think this rumor, because it's not really a rumor. It's a false rumor. But there's rumors that Matt Stafford is going to be, the Rams and Vikings were in serious trade talks for Matt Stafford. I just don't see that actually happening. I think Russo, Schefter, I don't think any of them have confirmed it. So my prediction here is Matt Stafford will not be a Viking this season, this current season. So he could be this offseason, I don't know. But this regular season or postseason, Matt Stafford will not be a Viking. All right, so that is it for this episode. Do thank you for joining us here again on the 301 show. There should be a new episode next week. Um, and I just want to, give a big thank you to everyone that's listened and especially those that consistently tune in. I do ask you if you want to hear anything, if you want us to or if you want me to talk about anything specifically, uh, just let me know in the comment section. I will be happy to talk about anything you guys want me to talk about. So do leave something down below. And again, thank you for joining us here today. We will see you next time.